Once, in a secluded manor nestled between the fog-laden peaks of the Carpathians, lived the Accurso family, a family whose last name had long since faded from any living memory. Their surname wasn't lost by accident but by necessity, erased by generations of hunters and scholars who sought to bury their tales in myths and whispers. The Accursos were a family bound not only by blood but by something far darker, something the human mind could barely fathom. Though the manor appeared abandoned, its high arched windows gazing blankly over the valley, the family thrived in shadows. Each night, they gathered beneath the hollow sound of midnight tolls in a grand hall, walls adorned with portraits of ancestors whose faces seemed to shift in the flickering candlelight. To those portraits, they offered blood, a ritual only they truly understood, a pact renewed with every generation to sustain their own twisted eternity. In this bloodline, there was the patriarch, Marius, a figure whose charm masked a hunger more ancient than any curse. Next to him stood his wife, Selene, whose beauty seemed to eclipse the night itself but whose voice held the chill of the grave. Their children, twins, Caspar and Alara, were forbidden to leave the manor's grounds, for their curiosity about the outside world remained unquenched. But unlike most children, who ached for freedom, Caspar and Alara's yearnings were far darker, laced with an insatiable thirst. Each night, the twins would listen intently as Marius told stories about the ancient blood rites, stories layered with hints of the family's secrets, veiled warnings, and lessons wrapped in tales of terror and desire. Their family thrived not on mere mortal blood but on something rare, more potent than the crimson of life alone. The Accursos craved something found only in the depths of fear itself, a blood thickened by terror, tinged with the final moments of a soul's despair. One night, Marius took the twins down to the manor's ancient catacombs, hidden below layers of stone and time. Down there, beneath the manor, was a room filled with chalices, each one carefully crafted from silver. They contained drops of blood, from victims spanning centuries, a collection older than they could comprehend. He explained that this was their true legacy, the wealth of their bloodline, a trove of life drawn from the rarest sources. But that night, Caspar noticed a strange cup, one slightly cracked with age, its silver dulled. Unlike the others, it seemed empty. Marius's eyes darkened when he saw Caspar staring. He turned to him and whispered, "That is the cup for the final bloodline, one which will decide if we live forever, or vanish from the world of men." As the moon dipped below the horizon, they returned to the great hall, but something had changed. A thrill of danger hung in the air, the hint of a power waiting to be awakened. And as the family retired to their quarters, Caspar and Alara glanced back to the catacombs, their minds already conspiring. They wanted to know what terror could fill that last chalice, what victim could make their bloodline unbreakable, eternal. Little did they know that the answer might lie closer than they dared imagine, with consequences that could lead their family to immortality or to ruin. As the days waned and shadows grew long, Caspar and Alara couldn't shake the vision of the empty chalice. The manor seemed to whisper to them, urging them down the hidden corridors, each night drawing them closer to a choice that, once made, could not be undone. Though forbidden to leave the grounds, the twins grew bolder, plotting an escape to venture into the nearby village, a place Marius had warned them never to approach. One night, while the rest of the family lay dormant, Caspar and Alara slipped through a secret passage, and found themselves beyond the protective walls of the manor for the first time. The village was asleep, but a thick, oppressive silence hovered over it, as if the townsfolk were waiting for something that never arrived. Only a handful of dim lights flickered from homes, shadows passing behind curtains. Yet not a single person dared to step outside. The twins spotted a young woman walking briskly down the path, her face hidden under a tattered shawl. Caspar felt the pull of hunger, a sensation that mixed dangerously with curiosity. Alara sensed it too, a feeling she had always known but had never tasted, and together, they approached her, moving as one, like specters in the night. The woman turned, and for a moment, her eyes locked onto theirs with an uncanny recognition. She whispered, "You? It's you," before they seized her, drawing her into the woods where the moon cast an eerie glow over the mist-shrouded trees. But as they drank, something felt wrong. The blood was different, cold, filled with a dread that seemed to consume rather than satisfy. The woman's body grew limp, yet her eyes remained open, staring past them. And as the last drop of blood touched their lips, Casper and Alara felt a strange darkness surge within, more powerful and insidious than any hunger. Suddenly, they realized they weren't alone. From the trees stepped a figure cloaked in black, a face pale as bone, and eyes that gleamed like twin stars in a bottomless void. He was not a stranger. He was the portrait they'd seen 100 times in the manor's dark halls, the first of their line, the origin of their curse. The figure's voice echoed, filling the air with an ancient resonance. You sought the blood to fill the final chalice, but now you've begun a fate worse than death itself. He gestured to the woman's lifeless body, which had begun to stir, her eyes now empty yet filled with a familiar hunger. This is your legacy. To feast is to create, and to drink of terror is to pass it on. As the realization struck, Casper and Alara watched as the woman transformed into something monstrous. Her mouth twisted in a hunger that mirrored their own. The figure vanished, leaving them alone with their creation, a creature bound to them by blood and dread, one that would seek them, even haunt them, to the ends of the earth. They knew they couldn't return to the manor. Not yet. The final chalice had begun to fill, but the price for their family's immortality had only just been paid, and with every drop it collected, they were certain it would demand more, a cost that would draw every last accurso into a cycle of hunger and horror beyond anything they had ever known. And so, Casper and Alara fled, haunted by their own darkness, knowing that somewhere, in the shadows, something terrible was waiting to catch up with them. Casper and Alara wandered for days, haunted by what they had unleashed, the cold gaze of the woman and the ancient ancestors' warning lingering in their minds. Each night, shadows seemed to follow them, and the chill of the cursed chalice grew stronger, as if it were tethered to their very souls. The siblings soon discovered that no matter how far they ran, they felt a strange pull drawing them back to the manor, as though something in its ancient stones demanded their return. Desperate to break the connection, they ventured into a forgotten monastery hidden deep within the Carpathian woods. Rumors had whispered of this place as a stronghold against their kind, a sanctuary where souls could seek refuge from dark forces. But when they arrived, the decrepit building bore signs of struggle: crumbling walls, charred floors, and broken relics scattered across the altar. It seemed whatever power had once resided here had been long extinguished, leaving behind only echoes of its former strength. The silence was interrupted by the sound of rustling fabric and a soft, brittle voice. A figure stepped out from the shadows, a monk, hunched and aged, his face as pallid as moonlight. His eyes held a glint of knowing, a look that seemed to pierce through the centuries of darkness woven around them. You carry a darkness that runs deep, he murmured, his voice crackling like old parchment. The blood you seek to escape binds you to a destiny far greater and far more terrible than you realize. Casper stepped forward, his voice filled with a rare vulnerability. We didn't want this. We only wanted to know our place in our family's legacy. The monk's gaze hardened. Your family's legacy was sealed long before you were born. The chalice you tried to avoid has tasted the blood of innocence for centuries, but now, it requires a darker price of bloodline sacrifice. The heart of the very family who created it. Alara recoiled, her face pale. What do you mean? The chalice must be filled by one of you, a final offering from the bloodline that gave it power. Only then can it be destroyed, and only then will your family's curse be broken. He glanced from one twin to the other, a sorrowful glint in his eyes. One must perish, and the other must complete the ritual. Stunned, Casper and Alara exchanged glances, both gripped by an unspoken fear. They knew the implications if one of them offered themselves to the chalice. The remaining twin would be bound to the family's curse for eternity. Carrying the bloodline and its horrors alone, the monk turned, gesturing to a stone archway in the corner of the room, covered by heavy, tattered drapes. Beyond here lies the ancient altar of severance, a place once used by those who sought to sever curses and break bonds of blood. But beware, it has been dormant for centuries, and it may no longer recognize those who seek mercy. With no other option, Casper and Alara stepped through the archway. They entered a cold, dim chamber filled with unlit candles and a worn, blood-stained altar that bore signs of rituals long forgotten. Their footsteps echoed ominously as they approached, each step weighed down by the gravity of what lay ahead. As they stood before the altar, the air grew heavy, and an ancient voice filled the room, whispering of blood and betrayal, of sacrifices made and debts yet unpaid. The monks' words echoed in their minds, a grim reminder of the choice they now faced. In that moment, the chalice appeared before them, its surface gleaming with an otherworldly light. It pulsed as if alive, awaiting the final act that would decide the fate of the Accurso family. Caspar turned to Alara, his eyes filled with sorrow and resolve, and she met his gaze, mirroring his despair. But as they each reached for the chalice, an unseen force pulled them back, their hands suspended midair. The ancestor's spectral figure appeared again, a smirk twisting his lips. "Did you think it would be so simple?" he whispered. "The chalice demands more than blood, it demands that you choose, that you forsake one another willingly. Only one of you can complete the ritual, but be warned, the one who remains shall bear the full weight of our family's sins." As his figure faded, Caspar and Alara realized the full horror of their predicament. One would be damned to carry the bloodline alone, haunted by every soul ever claimed by the Accurso curse. In silent agreement, they reached again for the chalice, knowing the choice before them, but just as their fingers brushed the cold silver, the chamber began to rumble, the stone walls quivering as if the manor itself had come alive, resisting their defiance. And then, from the darkness beyond the altar, a voice called their names, a familiar, mournful whisper they knew all too well. It was the woman they had turned, her hunger and despair now twisted into a longing that bound her to them. A creature unwilling to let her creators go, trapped between the chalice, their curse, and the wrath of the being they had created. Caspar and Alara faced the darkness, knowing that whatever choice they made, the Accurso legacy would never truly die. As the walls trembled and the specter of the woman advanced, her hollow eyes locked onto Caspar and Alara. Something in the twins shifted. They saw beyond her hunger and despair, beyond the darkness that had drawn her back to them. She wasn't merely their creation, she was a soul trapped in their family's curse, a remnant of every innocent life sacrificed to the Accurso name. For the first time, they realized that breaking the curse wasn't only for themselves, but for everyone it had ever touched. Caspar looked at Alara, determination setting in his gaze. "There must be another way," he said, his voice firm. "What if instead of breaking the curse by one of us dying, we break it by surrendering the bloodline altogether?" Alara's eyes widened, and the monk's warning echoed in her mind, asterisk, only one must remain. Asterisk, but perhaps, they thought, the curse could be broken without such a sacrifice, without a single bloodline to perpetuate it. Hand in hand, they approached the altar, standing side by side before the cursed chalice. With steady breaths, they whispered together, voices blending in a final act of defiance against their family's dark legacy. "We surrender our birthright, our blood, our lineage. We renounce our place in the Accurso family, the curse, and all it has claimed." A hush fell over the chamber as their words filled the air, thick and heavy with finality. The chalice trembled, then cracked, and a surge of blinding light erupted from it, enveloping the twins. The walls of the ancient chamber began to glow, filled with the shimmering figures of those who had perished to fuel the Accurso's twisted immortality. The ancestor's apparition reappeared, his face contorted in rage, but his form was fading, unraveling like mist in the morning sun. "No," he bellowed. "You cannot sever what binds you to the blood." Caspar and Alara stood their ground, hands still clasped. The light intensified, and the ancestor's form dissolved into nothingness. Around them, the spirits of those sacrificed by their family began to vanish as well, each one ascending, freed from the dark pact that had bound them to the Accursos. Finally, the chamber fell silent, the air light and still. The chalice lay shattered on the ground, its silver surface tarnished and cold. Caspar and Alara felt a weight lift from them. A coldness they hadn't realized was there now, replaced by warmth. Their hunger was gone, replaced by a sense of peace they had never known. They left the manor at dawn, watching as the sun rose over the Carpathian mountains, bathing the world in light. Behind them, the Accurso manor stood silent and empty, The curse dissolved. The legacy of the Accursos had ended, but the twins walked forward together, free to create a life of their own, one untethered from darkness, built upon the light they'd found within themselves. And as they disappeared over the hills, the last remnants of the curse faded, leaving only the memory of two souls who had defied their fate and, in doing so, had set themselves and countless others free.